Anytime from now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Kanda. I'm the CEO and founder of Shiki Group. Primarily, we are a short-term renovation accommodation company. We manage and develop, and we also offer in-house real estate brokerage services, amongst other products. I grew up in Sydney, Australia, and my mother is Japanese. So from an early age, I always had a interest in Japan, traveling to Japan every few years, getting pampered, loving it. So it was easy to see how, I really developed that love for this country and the culture. So when I came over here, I was 22. I guess initially I was thinking a year or so, and once I completed that, I did a fair amount of travel, maybe 15 months, after which I ended up back in Australia. But at that point, I kind of had grown away from that, so I felt a little bit of a culture shock going back. Yeah, at that point in time, I was considering exactly what to do, and a friend of mine, who's still a friend until this day, gave me some great advice. He basically said, come over to Japan, you get a job in 20 minutes. Once you get your language skills up. So he actually stayed in this property as well recently. But he said, you gotta get the language skills up. They're not good enough now. And you gotta do it as soon as you come to Japan. So that's some of the best advice I ever got. And that's advice that I give to anyone else who's in a similar situation. Do it right away, or you may never do it. Conversational Japanese is very far away from business Japanese. And to be honest, after even doing 9 months of full-time Japanese school, I was really struggling in the first job. They just don't teach you business Japanese. Perhaps there is a business Japanese course. That is not the one that I did. I finished the intermediary. I got N2. After working at the job, that's when I learned the business Japanese, and I also did the BJT test, which I would recommend for everybody, which is the Business Japan test, and you look at news articles and emails and things like that. The kind of skills you actually do need for business. So yeah, I would recommend actually for everybody to do N2 and then do BJT. N1, I'm not so sure. I had a few attempts at doing it, and then as soon as you look at the vocab, I don't know this word in English. Do I really need this word in Japanese? Probably not. So I did 9 months of the language school, and then I got a job with a Australian company named Toll, and that was in a analyst position, and I managed to get a few promotions there and have an experience of having a team and things like that, doing mainly analysis and kind of strategy related stuff, which was very enjoyable. And that lasted 7 years. And towards the end of that, I guess I could see the writing on the wall. So I started thinking about what to do next. And another continuous friend of mine asked me why I was not doing my own business, which kind of reminded me that was something I really wanted to do when I was younger, and I'd kind of forgotten about it as you start enjoying a nice level of income and, being a 20-year-old. So at that point, I was about 30, and I thought, that's right. Did want to have my own business. And I'd done a lot of travel over the years, some 60-plus countries, and I saw Japanese tourism coming up, 10 million in 2013, and thought that trend was going to continue. The first year I came to Japan, I came to Kyoto, and I remember looking at the old houses and thinking, there's a real opportunity here. But at that time, 22, no money, no experience, no network, no chance. But turns out 30, the chances start opening up. So it was Kyoto where I came and started the business. Couple of years setting the scene, and then in 2016 taking the reins. So it's actually 10 years this year, which is a very celebratory worthy milestone, I think.
You had this fascination for Machiya. First of all, what is Machiya?
So Machiya legally required to be built before 1950, and they required to be wooden structures. Depending on the law, the criteria can be strict or less strict. But if you look at it loosely, it's basically a traditional Japanese wooden house of a certain age. And there's a few other things like, they want the facade to still remain looking similar to its original state, roofing, things like that. Some technical things, but yeah, if you keep it simple, traditional Japanese wooden house. Actually, the renovations have been an area that I've enjoyed the most over the years. And I think after 10 years of being loosely involved, you start getting a bit of a feel for how a space could be renovated to be improved. Really cool to see your own ideas come out. Maybe one of the most enjoyable parts of the job. So that gave me a bit more confidence to give some more input going forward, particularly exclusively where it's our own money. But we have a couple of new projects now, and I'm definitely being active in how we would like to design the space.
So where does this interest in renovating old properties and interest in Machiya come from?
Yeah, I'm really not sure, to be honest. But for me, these older houses, particularly the one that we own, which is on the seaside, I feel like they kind of have a soul, I don't know if it's because of memories in there or whatnot, but yeah, I feel like they almost have like a personality, and depending on the way that you renovate them, I think it's a really artistic, opportunity, and can really treat it like a blank canvas, something you're working with, a few things on the canvas, say, and you can come up with a completely varied result depending on the person's input. So, I think it's really interesting thing to do to renovate old spaces, and it's maybe the most enjoyable part of our business.
Where do you think that comes from, the entrepreneurial spirit? Like, is your dad an entrepreneur, or your mom?
I would probably describe him as the opposite. He basically just had a job for about 35 years. Got a challenging relationship with my father, who's not a bad guy, but he struggles with communication and relationships with a lot of people. And I think, I don't know, maybe I just wanted to do something different. It probably encouraged me to try something different, seeing that. I think I was interested in, entrepreneurial activities from quite early. So, it's one of the great challenges in life, along with having a child and a partner. But it's really tough running a business, and I think a lot of people are probably not suited to it. So if you're not really driven to do it, I question whether you can do it, because you have to get through some rough, dark times to come out the other side. And so, I guess you need that kind of drive to make it through. If people say don't expect to make money for a couple of years, I remember this saying, I'm probably not going to make money for 2 years. And I remember being told after 3 years by some other guys that it's actually 5 years. So, and I can attest to that. It probably was 5 years. I mean, we may have been profitable initially when you have some honeymoon period, but look, it takes a lot of time once you come in full time and start, when you try and scale the business. I think it's possible to make money when you're tiny, and then you just have this period of where you're scaling, and then you need to survive until you break through the other side. Yeah, and that can take 5 years. And I mean, we got hit with COVID not too long after that, so there were a lot of unprofitable years there. When we started, it was like tourism's coming up, renting out my own apartment when I go away, and the trip's free. Maybe I should get some more apartments. Maybe I'll do it in Kyoto, I reckon. So I started getting them in Kyoto. I think we got 26 within a couple of years, and then they changed the laws. No apartments. At that point in time, it was like the Wild West, and people were just doing all kinds of things. We didn't really understand what the laws were or anything,
When you say 26 apartment units?
Yeah, basically apartments. And I think there was a couple of houses in the mix, but, we didn't know what the law was, and every man and his dog was doing that. And then the government came in and put the regulation in. So that was the first big hurdle for us. And so every apartment gone. And so I thought, at that point in time, I might be done here. But we had fortuitously got a couple of houses in the mix, and they just happened to be Machiya. So that was by chance. I think it was literally like 2 houses or something. And then from there, we were like, okay, better get some more Machiya then. So, I think we better get some houses. I think it was the houses at that point in time that were able to get the license. So we started adding some houses in the mix, and around that point in time, we had some people, and they asked us to manage their properties as well. So we started putting those ones into the mix, and then a few years down the line, the government came out and said, actually, basically, unless it's a Machiya, you can't run it. So that was the second time I had to basically rebuild the business. Turns out that some other, options came out along the line, but at that point in time, that's what it looked like, Machiya or out. And so a lot of the owners then gave up. And I would be very critical of the Kyoto government at that point in time. They should have grandfathered the law, because a lot of those early investors were domestic people who had developed these properties, in reliance of the opportunity that was perhaps not sold to them by the government, but, allowed by the government. And they should have provided better direction. Turns out we probably could have kept operating a lot of those anyway, but they just kind of threw in the towel. And so that was the second time I had to rebuild the business. And it was after that we started adding mainly Machiya, because it was legally easier to operate. And then at some point I remember some people contacting us saying, hey, we've got a Machiya and we were recommended by these people because you're the Machiya specialist. I was like, are we? They're like, oh. And you look at the website, lots of Machiya, and I'm like, oh, the market thinks we're the Machiya specialist. Great, I'm going to run with that.
Including this one.
This is actually not a Machiya. This is like Machiya-like, I would call it. Machiya-fu in Japanese. And there's nothing wrong with that, This is an older house. We do really specialize in those older houses, and I like renovating them rather than knocking them down in favor of some prefab building, which is not an interesting experience. Most of our houses are genuine Machiya, and this house is not, and it's actually the walkway that also makes it so it can't be licensed. So we operate this one as a monthly property under our real estate brokerage license, and we're able to offer it at a much more reasonable price than fully short-term licensed properties, which are very expensive at the moment in Kyoto. Something similar to this might cost, even like triple at the moment. So we're able to offer it for a pretty reasonable price. And I thought there would be a great opportunity there following COVID. At that time, we rented almost all the properties monthly because the short-term market vanished. And we did okay with that strategy. So I was thinking, post-COVID, maybe there's going to be an opportunity there as those properties all convert back into short-term. I can make the monthlies. And they're renting, like, not bad, but actually we don't make any money from the properties because we dropped our fee thinking that there's less work, but then the rate's lower. So it's almost like, the revenue that we get is like a sixth or something, which doesn't actually support the operation. Costs a lot of money to run a short-term rental operation. They're spread out all over the town. We have 38 staff. And, I've had some people comment that, in a way that the cost is zero. It's a astronomical cost every month, and on top of that you have, the linen, cleaning supplies, you're paying a lot to marketing, websites, all of that upkeep. We have, a lot of consultants, contractors involved with the business. So it's a lot of cost, but that's kind of what it takes in this business. So it's actually a quite low margin business that you need to scale considerably before you really see anything coming out the other side. I basically built this company with like $30,000. So we never owned any property. Early days, I just rented everything and we did some rental arbitrage. And then we moved on. When it was houses, we started putting some money into the renovation. So we would rent and renovate. That model was quite stressful through COVID because we had a situation where we'd done some big renovations and then, it was quite stressful if the owner was unwilling to be lenient on the rent during those times. So that just that rental type model really came under pressure through COVID, and we had to give quite a lot of the properties back. Fortuitously for us, the two properties where we did the biggest renovations, the owners were actually very nice, and they either gave us like half rent for a period or delayed rent for a while, and we managed to keep those. But looking back, that was quite risky. So I'm actually trying to move away from that model. Yeah, when COVID hit, I basically had to just put almost everything I had in. And then, I remember going to the bank and saying, guys, I'd like a bit of a loan, please. And they said, and looked at the numbers and said, the most we can give you based on these numbers is $5 million. I was like, that's half a month's expenses. This is going to be good. And walked out of there and then they, wasn't that stressed for some reason. 3 days later, they called me and they said, hey, so we'll give you $30 million. And so something's happened in those 3 days. Somebody's come and just said, open the floodgates. Maybe I wasn't that stressed because I knew that everybody was in a similar situation and that can't just have the whole country collapse. So it turns out I was right there. Thank God. And we survived COVID, and perhaps it's a little bit embarrassing to say, but perhaps that's my biggest business achievement so far, is surviving that in an industry that was ravaged. Perhaps more than that, I can say that I was able to protect all the full-time staff. We didn't let anyone go that was full-time during that period. Unfortunately, we couldn't preserve the part-time staff who were mainly cleaning. There just was no cleaning, so we had to shuffle that around and try and preserve the full-time jobs, and manage to preserve all of those. And so the team is really tight following that, following those times. And so we've come out of COVID with a quite experienced team, galvanized, perhaps you could say. And that really showed in 2023, where we were able to deliver 210% of the revenue of 2019. So, we didn't just come out and recover, we came out firing. And I think that a lot of that was due to being able to keep that team through that period and be in a position to capitalize when things open back up.
Why was it important to you keeping the team the way it was?
I consulted quite a few people at the start of COVID, and I got varying advice. Some of it was immediately terminate everyone or as many as possible. Did get that advice, and some people in the industry decided to take that route. We had competitors that literally terminated every single staff they had in Kyoto. And it's difficult to say why I didn't, but thinking back, I was thinking like, let's give it a moment. That's a very drastic move, and that's a move I would rather not make unless it's absolutely essential. But like, I felt like if you remove all the staff, you basically killed the company, was what I thought. I just recruited our second in charge, who'd come in from overseas, and I knew like that was the guy I needed to get this business to the next level. I really feel like turns out that was probably the best decision that I made, was to keep all the staff on. And it's really showing now. It's, making a difference now. And, I feel like, company is just a name, and it basically means nothing without the staff, So, the value of our company now is thanks to keeping all the staff part of the company.
Where do you think your company would be had you not listened to your gut and kept your team?
It's a good question. Haven't really thought about it. Put full energy on just rebuilding out the other side. I think it would be not in the current position for sure. Morale would have been shot for one, but the other thing is like, it was very difficult to hire after COVID. Everybody's trying to hire. It's very difficult to hire good quality staff. And it would have been very difficult to build that same roster from nothing in such a short period when everybody's scrambling to hire, I think. So, the answer is who knows. But I think the success that we've had following COVID is very much due to having kept that team.
Is it all about competitive salary?
Definitely not. Don't know how competitive our salary is, but all I can say is that hospitality salaries are not that high generally. I was surprised at how low they were, but what we do offer is I try and offer great work-life balance, and, I think it's really important to be refreshed and take breaks, and I want my staff to, feel refreshed and take breaks as well. So that's a big part of our culture. I lead by taking the breaks myself. That's something that is not valued in Japanese companies. And I really noticed that during my time working in such companies. And I wanted to completely 180 away from that. So I take breaks. All the senior management takes breaks. All the Japanese staff take breaks. And that is something I can offer. I cannot offer the best salaries in the country, but I can offer, as good a work-life balance as you can find in Japan. So we've got a lot of staff that have been in the company for, 4 or 5 years now. That's a massive strength. And it's a strategy of mine to retain staff. It really does. You lose a lot when you lose people, the experience, but also you have to, there's a lot of hidden costs there, the recruitment process, the training period. What is the cost of losing that experience? It's kind of hidden, but it's huge, the time it takes to train them. And so I think the best strategy is, get your good stuff to stay. And so I raised all my full-time staff salaries by 18 to 41% this year. Yep, that's right. As a result, funnily enough, our profit is not quite as high as I'd hoped. I really pushed it out to the staff. I am wondering if I pushed too much out, but there is competition for good staff right now. I had not been able to lift their salaries through COVID, obviously. I was overdue, and I wanted to make sure I retain them all. But yeah, I really want that part of the culture. I take a break, so should you. Go and enjoy the time with your family. Do it at a time that works for the business and yourself, and should be enjoying life as well as the job. I think it's absolutely vital to get people to stay.
So, Habanebros, what do we got here?
This is Habanebros. So, I thought I was going to be really original making a hot sauce, and then it seems like every other one of your guests also has a hot sauce. So it seems that I was a little wrong on that one, but this is our attempt. And the peppers are grown in Kyoto, and we have a specific fermentation process. This one is the classic sauce, which doesn't have any specific flavoring to it, so it's flavor neutral. Instead, I would describe it as umami heavy. So we sometimes talk about adding this umami bomb to your food. So, you can just get that kick and umami into any dish without manipulating the flavor. So enjoy the flavor of the dish, give it a little kick. It takes a lot of work actually to bring a food product to market. You've got to get licenses, all this testing. If somebody told me how long it takes to develop these products and how much they cost, not sure I would have continued doing it. But, here I am, 4 years in. Now we've got the new flavors out. We've gone through all the FDA process. We're ready to go in the States. Japanese products are extremely popular globally. Right now, Japan is hot. This country needs to take absolute, maximum opportunity of that, and hopefully, I can play on that a little bit with these products, taking them to the US. There's not many actually legitimate Japan-made sauces out there in the market, so we'll see how we go. So, I feel like the future in Japan is going to be in regional tourism. We've got a situation here where most travelers, 70% according to some of the publications, are sticking to the so-called golden route, which is Tokyo to Osaka, and stops in between on that Shinkansen route. And it's leading to a situation where it's, heavily crowded, and you can only take so many more people on that route. So, it's a lot of regular complaining in the media, and, it just so happens that the government's come out with an annual report this week saying that they want to push regional travel. And I think, we're supposed to hit 36 million travellers to Japan this year. With the target of 60, do the math, those people are going to have to be pushed outside of the golden route. So the problem with that is that the infrastructure throughout regional Japan is not ready for that. So what is the government doing about it? I'm not sure, but I think there's an opportunity there. And certainly there are a few people moving now, and I'm already moving to work on some regional projects, early stage, but I think it's a very important development for Japanese tourism, and it's a very important development for those regional communities which have really been left behind. And also, the local governments are very responsive so far, as are some of the banks. And so, we're going to need all of that support to be able to do these projects. But I'm also hoping I can get some, corporate support from some of the stronger companies in those regions, and some investor support to make some of these projects come to light. So if anybody's interested in learning more about those kinds of opportunities, I would love to discuss with them further, because we've got some quite big projects on the horizon, too big for me to, take them all the way myself. So we're definitely looking for some partners. I'm reaching out to people already now, and we'll be doing so even more as they progress. Currently, Japan is a great place to live. I think it's at this kind of sweet spot where the value for money is, it's got to be, maybe the best in the world living here right now. But with the yen sliding, where's it going? Yeah, there's a concern for what it's going to look like in the future. But, if you look around the world, it's not that many perfect places right now. So, perhaps the strategy is to have a few eggs in a few baskets. But for the moment, this is a fantastic place to live in right now. The other thing I would encourage people to consider is, we bought the house in the countryside 2.5 years ago, did a renovation, phenomenal price. There are houses in the countryside that are almost free, and a lot of them, it's getting a lot of press. Overseas, we get contacted about them. Unfortunately, they're so cheap that it's very difficult to make a business out of it. Being based here, trying to take people hours away for something with no commission that they may or may not buy. Like, it's difficult to make a business out of it. Even though I'd love to do it, and perhaps we are kind of discussing whether there is a way where we can do it. But for people that do live here, go and check out the countryside, and stay in a few places, see how you like it, and maybe buy something.
First wrap-up question. What is your favorite Japanese word or phrase?
So I've always liked tada yori takai mono wa nai, which is basically no free lunches.
What's your favorite Japanese food or restaurant?
I think kaiseki is a real celebration of Japanese cuisine, because you get a little bit of everything in there, and the skill level is, basically at the top of Japanese culinary world. But in saying that, I think like a great izakaya is the poor man's kaiseki. Tempura matsu in Arashiyama, it's absolutely phenomenal. Been there 30, 40 times.
What do you miss about Sydney, Australia?
I think for a long time it was mainly the beach, and we got that beach house a few years ago, and I just realized I can go to the beach every day now. Like, why didn't I do this 10 years ago?
What was the lowest point of your life while living in Japan, and how did you overcome it?
It was funny actually, because without knowing the answer, I think a lot of people just assumed that it would have been during COVID. It was probably a couple of years before that, 2018. I thought I was going down. I remember feeling, pretty rough. I thought I was going to run out of money, and it was interesting that we had like a Christmas party 2018, and then I saw the same person during COVID. We had it at a restaurant. I saw the same person during COVID at a restaurant, and she said, you don't look as bad as that time in 2018. And we never talked about it at that time, but I was like, you're right. That was way worse. So, that's a tough time when you feel like you're going to lose your business. It's a time that a lot of entrepreneurs have had, and it's kind of a rite of passage. If you're a business owner, I think you got to overcome those times.
Any parting message or advice to other Gaijin?
Yeah, I think as a foreigner, you definitely have like an edge that a lot of Japan-born domestic people don't have, and that's the fact that you've got that international experience. And so my recommendation would be to use it, whether it's in your job or in a business. If you're not sure if you want to do a business, I think I mentioned it before, but it's probably not for you. But if you have that desire, give it a go and look towards your overseas experience and incorporate that.
So, one more segment. Pay it forward. So my last guest is out of Osaka, and he has his own food channel on YouTube. He gives tours, and he works with some tour companies as a freelancer. So his pay it forward, a stack of these pins.
it's a funny,
yeah, but he's that type of character too. You'll see. Yeah, he's a character.